All right, so in chapter 5, we're talking about tactical rate management. So we're gonna talk about all the different types of rates we might have. But tactical rate management, is that long term or short term?
Short term
Short term, what do we mean by short term?
in the coming week or month.
Yeah, probably within the coming week, maybe within the next 2 or 3 weeks, possibly even consider the next month. Okay. That short term, that tactical rate management are things that we can do in that short time, within that short term period to react to make sure that we get to the goals of what we set. Um, it could also be, no, never mind, just kidding. We're gonna talk about just that in chapter 6. All right, so different types of rates that we might have. Which one of these rates were you not aware of prior to taking the quiz today? Which one was new to you? Edward,
Complimentary rate.
complimentary rate, okay? Yeah, complimentary means what? Free, okay? Complimentary rate. Why would we give somebody a complimentary rate? Why would we give them a free night?
Loyalty.
Possibly loyalty.
Mess up.
Yeah, so a guest service recovery. So if we made a mistake in some way, we may go ahead and comp their night. We might give their room complimentary in order to make up for the error that we made. Now, if we're going to comp the room, if the room rate is $250 a night, the mess up that we made has to be pretty big, right? So what we're going to do to make it right in our guest service recovery has to match the level of the mistake that was made. Okay. If the mistake is that check-in time is at 4 o'clock and they're there at 4, but we don't have any rooms ready, we get them in at 4:30. Does that warrant giving them a free night, the whole night free?
No.
No. You know what? I'm sorry, Miss Shuminsky, our room is not quite ready yet. Here's a coupon for a complimentary beverage in the bar if you want to go enjoy that, and then I'll let you know as soon as your room is ready. It should be within the hour. Okay. That complimentary beverage is going to soothe that person in the meantime while they wait for their room to be ready. Okay. So what we give in complimentary is something that needs to be in the same proportion to the error that was made. Okay, if there is a huge issue, um, maybe I don't know. I'm trying to think of what would be an issue that I would give an entirely comped free room. Um, Typically, it's going to be things like either things that are either out of our something that might be out of our control, like maybe a guest experienced bed bugs, unfortunately, right? It happens. It's not, it is not something that is associated specifically with the budget or economy hotels. And so if a guest does experience bed bugs, we have to move them to a different room. We probably are going to comp their room and not charge them for that. Okay. But we also might comp their room because they are looking at coming to have a meeting here in San Antonio or at our hotel at our property. And if they're going to be spending, I don't know, three, four, 500,000 with our property over the course of a week, we could probably give them a free night, complimentary night to come see the hotel and see if that's where they really want to have their meeting. Okay. Good. What else? What other rates?
Hurdle rate.
The hurdle rate, yeah. So the best available rate or the hurdle rate, if you think about it as anybody ever run hurdles in track and field? I did when I was in junior high, right? You just want to get over that hurdle. Just want to get over that hurdle. That's the rate that our best available rate that we have available for guests that we want for the lowest rate that we're going to be offering that night. Okay. So the rack rate is the highest rate that we can charge for the room. Okay. But oftentimes if we have low demand, what we talked about last time, where we have low demand, we have unconstrained demand, then we're probably going to discount off of our rack rate to get to that best available rate or the hurdle rate. Okay. Now, if a guest comes in and our best available rate is $200 and they're not able to spend that, that's too much what they were anticipating paying. Do we just say thank you so much? Have a wonderful day. I hope you find what you're looking for. No, as front desk people, we are trying to we are salespeople, right? And so we might ask them, do you have any memberships that you might qualify for discounts I can check for you? AAA, that's those promotional rates. Okay. Oops. Those are those promotional rates. AAA has negotiated with the different hotels to give a promotional rate. So if they are a AAA member, then they get anywhere from 5 to 10% off the best available rate as a discount. Okay. If they are older, maybe they have AARP. Okay. Those are different groups that advocate for their members that pay and are part of that club or that part of that association that negotiate getting a discount on those rooms. Okay. What else?
Be the government.
Government. Okay. Does anybody know what the government rate is for San Antonio? Let's take a look. So per diem, anybody know what per diem translates to?
Per day.
Per day. Okay. Diem is day in Latin. So per diem, this is what the government has set as the per diem rate for different areas. Now it changes based on the area that you are in. So in San Antonio, it also changes based on the time of the year. So February, what's happening right now in February? The rodeo. So the rodeo happens, which means most hotels are generally pretty full. And so that government rate of 137, a lot of hotels were turning that down because they knew they could get a higher rate with people that were here for the rodeo. Okay. And
Isn't February 161?
exactly. So then in February, the government rate goes up to 161. So it's a higher rate, which means hotels are more willing to take that rate. Okay. It might be still discounted from their best available, but it's a better discount than 137. Right. And so during February, which is rodeo month, March, which is spring break, the government rate goes up, but then it goes back down to that 137. And I want to say this was the first time in over 10 years, 6 to 10 years. I can't remember what the number was. I remember I was at a meeting once and they said this was the first time in over almost 10 years that they actually changed the government rate in San Antonio. It used to be around the 120 mark. And so it was really hard for hotels to accept that rate when they knew they could get a higher rate in other areas. Anybody else want to look at any other place? Actually, let's look at 25 and see what San Antonio was. 137, 24, 143 across the board. All right. Let's do a new search. Anybody else curious about another city or state? Sebastian. New York. So New York City, the government rate is 342 at the end of last year. This year, January was 179, goes up to 281, 237, and then 342. But if you look at the more rural areas like Binghamton, that is more upstate, central New York, a little bit lower rate. Let's do one more. Anybody else?
LA.
LA. Oops, not Colorado, California. All right, so Los Angeles is 191 across the board. So hotels can choose whether or not they want to accept the government rate. If someone calls in and says we have a government rate, um, we want to use that rate, the hotel can say yes, or they can say no, it's not available right now. Okay. Any other ones?
Event rates.
Event, yeah. So if we have something special happening in the city, so like for example, when Final Four comes or the Valero Alamo Bowl, they negotiate an event rate with the specific hotels. So that way people that are traveling for that event, specifically, usually it's like the schools that are traveling, they'll qualify for that special event rate. So we might also have like a fiesta rate. And so if it's a special event that's happening throughout the city, we might have that rate coming up. So I remember when I was working at La Quinta, um, I was relatively new to Fiesta. I didn't really do Fiesta much when I grew up here in San Antonio. Um, but it was the second weekend. Our normal rate was like 109. And all of a sudden, I started getting people calling in for the HEB rate. The HEB rate was $86 back then in 2009. And the HEB rate is a corporate rate. Okay. Oops. The HEB rate was a corporate rate, and they basically had to determine who qualifies for that corporate rate. Okay. For that corporate rate, for the HEB back in 2009, anybody who worked for HEB could get that corporate rate. So all they had to do is bring in their HEB name badge and their most recent pay stub, and we would honor that $86 rate for the night. Okay. Our normal rate was 109. So 86 wasn't a huge discount off of that. Well, I start noticing, I'm a front desk agent. I start noticing people are calling in and they're asking for these specific dates, which I later realized was the second weekend of Fiesta. All right. So all the parades are happening that weekend. And our rate was 199 for single and it was 209 for double occupancy. And I was really confused as to why somebody was getting a $86 rate when our rate was $209. Um, and so I hung up the phone, took the reservation because I was a front desk agent. That's what I do. I'm doing my job. Took the reservation, hung up the phone, and then 2 minutes later, somebody else calls and they want the HEB rate. It's like, sure, I can do that for you. So I take the reservation. And again, remind you, I don't really know much about Fiesta because the only time I went to Fiesta is if I had a sibling that was marching in the band. That's all we did growing up, not much. And so finally, after about the fourth or fifth call, I was like, this is really weird. I've had like 5 calls in the last half an hour for the HEB rate. And so I asked the sales manager and I said, hey, I'm really confused. I've had 5 calls in the last half an hour for this $86 rate, but our normal rate's 209. And her face just dropped. Her eyes got real big, and she had forgotten to close out that rate. And so, sure enough, a few moments later, somebody else called and they're like, but my friends have called and they told me they just called and got this rate. And I said, yes, your friends were very lucky. They were got the last room available at that rate. But as our occupancy fills up, certain rates get closed out and that rate is now closed. I cannot take it. I'm like, I'm happy to sell you the room for $209. They were not too happy with that. And I don't think they ended up booking. I don't recall because that was a long time ago, but I don't recall them booking the room at 209. Where in my mind, I was thinking, just charge each of your 10 friends you're going to cram into that room $20 and you'll cover the cost of your hotel room. And so luckily, my grandmother turned 90 years old that weekend. And so I was not in town during that weekend. Um, so, but that's the corporate rate. We have to identify who qualifies and what's the qualifications. What do they need to show to qualify for that rate? What else? Any other one? What about the employee rate? What is y'all's employee rate for Hilton?
$40 to $70.
$47?
I'll say 42 cents.
Oh, $42.70. Okay, depending on the level of the hotel. Okay. What about Marriott?
79 or 159 if you get like the parking package.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Any other property in here that's not Hilton or Marriott? I know Hyatt typically does 12 room nights for free for the year. So they don't have a rate. You have 12 nights to use for free throughout the year. But in addition to the employee rate, you also have the friends and family rate, which is an additional discount off of that best available rate. All right, we talked about rack rate already. The rate achievement factor, RAF. This basically is a percentage on how close we get to that rack rate. Okay, how close we get to actually achieving our rack rate. Okay. So the lower the percentage, that means more discounts were applied or given. The higher, the closest to 100%. Now, can we have over 100%? Why not, Lily? When we have a rate achievement factor, can we have a rate achievement factor over 100%? You answered correctly, no. But there's a specific reason why. What are we trying to achieve? The rack rate. And that's the highest price we can charge for our room. So we can't have more than 100%. That means we charged more than our rack rate, which is in some areas against the law. Okay. If we charge more than that rack rate, that could be considered price gouging, right? So let's say we have a special event, we forget to change our rack rate. I think in the state of Texas, Brianna, do you remember what Scott said at THLA? I think state of Texas needs, was it 30 or 60 days advance notice? I think it was 30 days. So within 30 days, you can appeal, you can say to the state of Texas, this is my new rack rate. Okay. And then after that, you can post that rack rate. But you can't charge that rack rate until it's approved or you've sent in that 30-day notice of the change of your rack rate. And so those of you who are working in hotels, if you know a huge event is coming up and your rack rate, you think you can get more than your current rack rate, you can increase that for that special event if you need to. It has to be within reason though. Okay, you can't just change your rack rate from $400 to $6,000 just because you think you can. It does still need to be within reason. All right. So we have static pricing and we have dynamic pricing. What does the word dynamic mean?
Constantly changing.
It means that it's changing. Okay. It flows. We can update it as we need to. Okay. Static pricing means it stays the same. So if I have 250 rooms and my static price is $130, that means if I sell all 250 rooms, my revenue is going to be $32,500. Now, for dynamic pricing, how dynamic pricing typically works is based on occupancy. So as we start off, we usually have those lower rates. As things get filled up, so as our rooms fill up, then as our occupancy increases, then we move into other rate categories, other rates. So the first 25 rooms, we sell at $110. The next 25 rooms, we go up by $10. The next 100 rooms, we go up by another $10. Okay. And then the last 75, the first to the last 75, and then the last 25 rooms, we sell them at that 150, that premium rate. Because remember, as supply decreases and demand is increasing, we typically can charge a higher rate. Okay. And so if we do that dynamic pricing, that's a difference of $500 per day. And you think that $500, that's not that much. It's an extra $182,000 a year in revenue that can come in if we practice that dynamic pricing versus static pricing. Questions, comments, concerns about static and dynamic pricing?
Does that have to get approved? Like how you said, yeah, whenever you want to change your rack rate, does that also have to get approved if it's dynamic?
So the dynamic pricing, it kind of depends on the situation. So I had friends who run a Best Western hotel, and they had a front desk agent that was their front desk supervisor. And she had been with the hotel for so long that they basically trusted her to make those changes. Typically, it'll be their revenue manager who will be making the changes in the rate. So the average front desk person is not just going to see the increase and then just change the rate automatically. So typically those rate changes are set in the computer by the revenue manager. So as it goes through, so sometimes I'm not sure if you guys have, um, if you've booked airline tickets recently online, oftentimes they'll say there's like four left at this price or two left at this price. So basically what they're saying is, and actually this recently I was booking a trip to Seattle and it said one seat left. My friend and I were booking them like we were sitting in the same room, and I just happened to book first. So then he got a higher price because I got the last seat at that lower price. So typically it's built into that computer system. It's automated once it hits a certain percentage, then it goes up to the next level. Questions, comments, concerns about static, not static, but tactical, short term, changing our rates. We could also implement what we learned, I do believe it's in chapter 3 about the identical net revenue. So let's say we are at this 140 rate. Okay. If we're at this 140 rate and we see people aren't making reservations as much, we might go ahead and do that identical net revenue analysis and see what if we drop it back down to 130 for some of these other rates. What percentage do I have to get to have that identical net revenue?